Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Sunday, December 7th, and I am your host, Josh Newberg. We made it through another recruiting cycle. Couldn't have done it without you guys. Thank you. If you remember, we went live on National Signing Day. That was a lot of fun. Were you here for the live show? Then we came back on Friday for the Chris Henry Jr. decision. That was a lot of fun. Me and Steve hopped on that live. And today, we are going to keep it going. As always, hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. Truly the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. Make sure you guys are subscribed. So we got a big show today. We're going to talk some Texas Tech. We're going to talk LSU with Lane Kiffin on campus. We got Greg Smith talking some Nebraska and EJ Holland talking Michigan. So we have a big show. But first, let's talk about the biggest developments that went down during the week of National Signing Day. Now, not just the news from Wednesday, but the days leading up to it and all the way through. Make sure you guys are subscribed. If you watched one of our shows this season, then jump on board, hit subscribe. All right, let's start with Ole Miss flips five-star Jace Matthews. Yeah, the number 20 player in America flipped to Ole Miss. He was committed to Auburn for several months. Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss, no problem. Let's add a five-star weapon to the fold, and Ole Miss does in Jace Matthews. All right, James Franklin moves Virginia Tech up 100 spots. The Hokies go from 118 to 27. So not quite 100. I know 100 just sounds great, but they did move up 91 spots. That's insane. And Franklin did this mostly by decimating his previous employer's recruiting class. He flipped 11 recruits from Penn State, now up to number 27. Unbelievable week for James Franklin and Virginia Tech. All right, number one wide receiver Chris Henry sticks to Ohio State. The longtime Ohio State commit announced on the Pat McAfee show that it would be the Buckeyes in the end. Now, Brian Hartline leaving made his decision really tough. Texas jumped in the mix. Oregon, obviously. Oregon was the odds-on favorite to flip him if he was going to flip. Miami also in there as well. But Oregon felt really good the day before, mostly because all the experts were predicting the flip. But that day, on Friday, Oregon fans were ready. About 2 hours prior to his appearance on Pat McAfee, the intel goes the other way. It was going to be Ohio State. And sure enough, when he went on the show, he announced that he was indeed sticking to Ohio State. That leads us to the next big topic. That's the Legend Bay flip drama. I don't even know where this one stands right now. Probably the craziest recruitment, maybe not just on signing day, but the entire cycle. Remember Legend Bay, elite athlete out of the state of Texas, committed to Tennessee, flipped his commitment about 3-4 weeks ago now to Ohio State. It seemed like he was going to sign with Ohio State. Then the craziness happened on National Signing Day. He signs with Tennessee. Well, at least somebody signed his letter of intent with Tennessee. There's a lot of drama going on. He's locked out of his social accounts. It sounds like he wants to go to Ohio State. The family wants him at Tennessee. We've seen these dramatic signing day recruitments happen before, and this is another one. So Legend Bay is signed with Tennessee. He has options. We'll see what happens. Does he end up hitting the portal and ending up at Ohio State? Does Josh Heupel get a hold of him and have a great conversation? He ends up being a Tennessee Volunteer. We'll just have to wait and see, but that was a heck of a storyline. Moving on, LSU locks in an elite defensive line class. Really impressive. Lane Kiffin, known for his offensive prowess, does what he needs to do to keep number one defensive lineman Richard Anderson intact and signed and committed. Number one, Lamar Brown, Trenton Henderson, Deuce Geralds. This class is one of the best D-line classes in America. It would have been a shame for Lane Kiffin to lose a piece or two here, but he keeps it all intact. Huge additions on that defensive front. Speaking of, edge Julian Walker flips to South Carolina. He had been committed to Michigan since the summer, but South Carolina just never gave up. Michigan signed a great class, but this one stings a bit because he's the number 26 player in America. When it's all said and done, he's going to end up being a 5-star. And I know they got Carter Meadows, but man, it would have been nice to bookend 2 5-star edge rushers up there in Ann Arbor. Julian Walker flips to South Carolina. Top 10 quarterback Landon Duckworth makes a final decision. Remember, he committed to South Carolina early in the cycle. Then at the end of July, Duckworth announced a second decision. He was indeed committing to South Carolina again. And then on signing day, he delayed his signing with South Carolina. Why? Because LSU came calling. It was tense for a little bit there, but Landon Duckworth, let's call it a third commitment to South Carolina. He is going to Columbia. All right, USC finishes strong almost the entire cycle. The number one team in the recruiting rankings resided in Southern California. UGA made a run at him. Notre Dame made a run. Oregon made a run. But USC left no doubt by flipping wide receiver Caden Dixon-Wyatt on signing day from Ohio State. He had been committed since May, but USC gets it done. Nobody could touch USC. Almost wire to wire, number one team in America in 2026. All right. That leads us to our biggest development of the week. Number one quarterback Jared Curtis flips his commitment from Georgia to Vandy. This one started bubbling up like 3 weeks ago. Georgia fans were adamant. Georgia fans were in the mention. Steve doesn't know what he's talking about. Steve, this is clickbait. Steve, there's absolutely nothing going on, Steve, but his mom. Well, in the end, Jared Curtis makes a third commitment. Remember, he committed to Georgia twice prior to flipping to Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt gets its first five-star, its first number one quarterback, coming off of the heels of what Diego Pavia has been doing. Could Jared Curtis be next? He could be starting in Nashville next season. So that goes down as our biggest development. There's no way I covered them all. So you guys talk to me. What do you think was the biggest development? Was it the Jared Curtis flip? Was it USC finishing number one? What do you guys think? Was it Chris Henry Jr.? Was it something totally off the radar? Talk to me. What was the biggest development of this signing period? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk LSU recruiting, because Lane Kiffin has been the head coach for 1 week today. Yes, 1 week, and what a week it's been, huh? It feels like it's been about a month because of signing day, so we're here to talk a little assistant coaching change, some recruiting as well. Long off season is here for LSU fans. This is what we've been waiting for all season, the off season. Make sure you guys hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. We're going to be talking transfer portal and recruiting when it comes to LSU all off season long. Let's bring in Sam Spiegelman. Speaking of signing day, was LSU able to hold on to that elite defensive line class? I know pretty much all of them chose not to sign on Wednesday, which I think was a bit shocking, but what is the final result here?
They got 4 for 4. I think we can amend it. Lamar Brown, the number one player in the country, ended the week by signing Friday. He actually signed Thursday night, went public with it Friday. Big Rich Anderson, the number one defensive line prospect in the country, flirted with putting off signing until Friday or even February. He went through. He's going to be a mid-year graduate. And then winning those 2 out-of-state battles, getting Trenton Henderson on board. Of course, he's from the Panhandle. A lot of new changes, not only in Gainesville and Auburn, a lot of ties there. LSU is able to hold on because a couple of their coaches are going to still be in Baton Rouge. And, of course, Deuce Gerald, a Baton Rouge native, famously committed to LSU because Frank Wilson coached his dad at Ole Miss. He wanted to follow in Dad's footsteps and play for his hometown, and he ended up sticking with the Tigers despite Georgia Tech and Ole Miss making late runs there.
Was Deuce Gerald's probably the most heated down the stretch? Because it seems like Rich Anderson and Lamar Brown, that was maybe just a little posturing there.
Absolutely. Deuce Gerald is an Ole Miss legacy, and Pete Golding as the defensive coordinator and Randall Joyner, the defensive line coach, still obviously, in prominent roles as the head coach and D-line coach, have fantastic relationships with Deuce Gerald. He wanted to play in the SEC. I think the opportunity to create his own legacy at LSU really loomed large, and I know we're going to talk about it, but they got some exciting news about their D-line coach that he was tipped off about as well.
All right, speaking of defense, the portal's about to open. Retention season is here. You got portal season. Well, this is retention season. So who do you think it's most important to retain on this defense?
Yeah, you have to talk about their number one corner, DJ Pickett. Was absolutely sensational as a true freshman this year. He was Corey Raymond's guy. He was Corey
Yeah.
Raymond's guy dating back to his time in the swamp, and he brought DJ Pickett to Baton Rouge despite strong pushes from not only Florida but Miami, Oregon, and all the other blue bloods across the country.
Yeah.
Corey Raymond is going to stay in Baton Rouge, so I think that's going to loom pretty large for the Tigers' chances of holding on to this elite cornerback. And obviously, they're going to hit the portal to find some more help around him. Additionally, you have the Weeks brothers. They famously committed to play for Blake Baker. All three of these brothers. We know that some of the Weeks boys are even more familiar with Lane Kiffin at this point, but Blake Baker staying on to be LSU's defensive coordinator, passing up on the Tulane head coaching job. He's going to be a Power 4 head coach this time next year, but until then, he's going to it looks like he'll be able to hold on to the Weeks in Baton Rouge moving forward.
Yeah, really important there. Pretty interesting that Lane Kiffin's signing day was all about who he could retain on defense and signing that elite D-line class. Not exactly what you'd expect from Lane Kiffin, but I think that shows just how important this job is to him, showing that the defensive line is where it starts with Lane Kiffin. Hey, we're going to talk offense now. And when it comes to the quarterback position, what do you think LSU will do? They got Colin Hurley on campus. They got Michael Van Buren. Do you think they ride with those guys or hit the portal?
I've heard some whispers that maybe Colin Hurley won't be in Baton Rouge this with Lane Kiffin coming into town. After not signing a high school quarterback the last two cycles, LSU is going to have to replenish this depth chart. Whether it's an Austin Simmons, obviously the young quarterback who started the season off for Lane Kiffin in Oxford, or elsewhere in the portal, guys with Louisiana ties, guys that Lane Kiffin recruited at Ole Miss. He was in it for a lot of quarterbacks that are obviously going to look in at Baton Rouge, the opportunity to play for not only Kiffin, but Charlie Weiss Jr., and have an opportunity to play pretty early. You're going to think that Michael Van Buren is going to want to stay. He got some great experience at the end of the season, but I'm sure coaches are calling him after what he was able to put up over those last couple of games. So LSU is going to need more than one transfer quarterback this year, and they're going to have to also take advantage of this 2027 cycle. They have a commitment from Peyton Houston, but I wouldn't be surprised if they start knocking on the door with Elijah Haven, who of course is famously trending toward Alabama right now.
Yeah, not saying I expect it, but you could see both Colin Hurley and Michael Van Buren hit the portal. So I think even if they stay, I still think, like you said, they're not taking a quarterback in the 2027 cycle, or 2026 cycle. So they will probably, and most likely, hit the portal for a quarterback, which will be exciting because that'll be Lane Kiffin's first quarterback that he brings in. We'll see what happens there. We've talked a little bit about some of the retention, Blake Baker, that defensive staff staying, but what about on offense? How important is Frank Wilson to LSU right now? Shea Dixon has a report kind of still up in the air. I mean, as of now, Frank Wilson's still with LSU. What do you think is going to happen? How important is it to retain him? Inside Scoop listeners, let's talk game time because the NFL season is underway, and who doesn't love to see their favorite NFL team live and in person, especially when you can go with a bunch of your buddies, but tickets aren't always going to be easy to find. And getting deals on those last-minute tickets can be frustrating when all you want to do is be there for the moment your team runs out on the field. Well, thankfully, the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing ticket experience that only takes a few simple clicks. The app is easy to use, and the Game Time guarantee means you can trust that you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, fees are always included, so what you see is what you pay. You can even get into NFL games as low as $100. That's why I use the Game Time app. It is super simple, and it makes the experience of buying great seats a breeze. Also, one of the coolest features I've seen is the Game Time lowest price guarantee. It's where the Game Time will credit you 100% of the difference to guarantee you are getting the lowest price if you find cheaper tickets elsewhere. All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code INSIDESCOOP. That's promo code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's Inside Scoop for $20 off Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Yeah, it's, Frank Wilson is famously the best living, breathing recruiter of the state of Louisiana out there. And he was the centerpiece in Lamar Brown and Big Rich's recruitments. We know that Rich Anderson, the number one defensive lineman, was the first commitment to LSU in the 2026 class. At the time, LSU was making multiple defensive line coaching changes.
Mm-hmm.
The catalyst was Frank Wilson was always there. He's famous for his grassroots in the city of New Orleans. Lamar Brown, we also know famously, Texas A&M made a really serious run at bringing the 5-star athlete out of Baton Rouge. As soon as Frank Wilson and, of course, Blake Baker got involved in that recruitment more so, it started to favor the Tigers ahead of decision time. Well, with Blake Baker remaining on staff, with Corey Raymond remaining on staff, I think it's looking – I wouldn't say that Frank Wilson is not still a valuable member, but we already saw that these kids saw some continuity and they're excited about LSU. And the fact is, there's a lot of guys with Louisiana ties on this roster and in this building. And in the NIL era, if a kid wants to play at LSU and the price is right, it may not be so much about the lead recruiter as it is about the opportunities available to them in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, good point. All right, LSU fans, off season's here. What do you guys make of signing day? But more importantly, what do you think LSU should do at quarterback this offseason? Let me know your thoughts. Comment section below. Let's talk some Wolverine recruiting. Did Michigan just get a big boost on the recruiting trail from a rival? Kerry Coombs, former Ohio State coordinator, is coming to Ann Arbor to coach special teams. News broke on that about 24 hours ago. Now, if you remember, Tony Alford, Michigan's running back coach, came to Michigan via Ohio State 2 years ago. 2 years later, number one running back Savion Hyder signs with Michigan. So will the hire of Coombs mean similar results? We're going to talk with E.J. Holland of the Wolverine. But first, Michigan fans, do me a favor. Exciting offseason, important offseason. We're going to be talking Michigan recruiting. So make sure you are a subscriber here at the Rivals Recruits channel because, as you know, this is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, let's bring in E.J. Holland with the Wolverine. Kerry Coombs, former Ohio State coordinator, is coming to Ann Arbor. What do you make of the hire?
It's a good hire. It's a great hire, actually. I mean, I think Michigan's former assistant, J.B. Brown, the former special teams coordinator who the Wolverines parted ways with a couple of days ago, he had some Texas ties. He did a good job of identifying some guys early on, like Jaden Sanders. Last cycle, he was responsible for a lot of that early identification throughout the Lone Star State. His father was a former high school head coach in Texas for decades. So I think, losing him, you lose some ties to the state of Texas where Michigan had success this cycle, landing 4 Texans. But, the special teams was not good this season. And outside of those early Texas ties, J.B. Brown didn't bring too much from a recruiting perspective. Kerry Coombs brings a lot. He's a guy that I've been familiar with dating back to my time on the Texas beat. The first time I heard about him, he came down to Texas, beat Texas for former 5-star cornerback Jeff Okudah. And I was very close to Okudah, and I remember him talking up Coombs and how great of a relationship he had. And that was a big reason why he went up north to Ohio State. Coombs has great ties throughout the entire Midwest, obviously in Ohio, but he was also the area recruiter in the Detroit Metro. Next cycle, Michigan is going to have to win in its own backyard. And that means having as many relationships as possible with high school coaches in the area, having great relationships throughout the region. This cycle, Michigan worked from the outside in, meaning, it was a weak year in the state of Michigan in the Midwest. So they had to take a true national approach and then spot recruit their own backyard. Next cycle, extremely strong in the Midwest, particularly in the state of Michigan. So I think having a boost in Kerry Coombs here in the Midwest, in your own backyard, that's going to help Michigan next cycle as it really prioritizes the state of Michigan and its home region.
All right, well, we'll see if the recruiting efforts pay off immediately. I agree with you. I think he's going to come in, make a difference as Michigan looks to reload. Speaking of reloading, did Michigan do enough at wide receiver? Signing day was just about 3-4 days ago. What do you think about Michigan at the wide receiver position? Kind of a lot of comings and goings.
It was wide receiver madness during the early signing period. You had a lot of moving parts throughout the day that were really unexpected. Michigan had 3 wide receiver commits going into the early signing period. One was 3-star wide receiver Jalen Pyle. He wasn't going anywhere. And then you had 4-star wide receiver Zion Robinson, Rivals 300 wide receiver Travis Johnson. Those were the kind of bigger names as far as the class goes at wide receiver. And Johnson and Robinson never really gave us any concern to think these guys are on the verge of flipping or we have to really monitor them. But early in the morning, we saw that Zion Robinson posted on his Instagram that he was delaying his decision, which kind of caught us off guard a bit. I think it caught Michigan off guard a little bit too. The good thing, and we'll get to what Michigan was able to do, but that whole situation was crazy. At first, we heard that Texas could be the reason for why he was delaying. There was some contact from the Longhorns, but they didn't make a really big push. And then I got the text that Stanford was the one making the big push. So I wrote about Stanford, and then I hit up Sam Spiegelman, who also had put out that Texas was the team that was causing this delay. I was like, no, Sam, it's actually Stanford. And, I think we were both kind of caught off guard, like Stanford? But Stanford was a finalist for Zion Robinson. One of the biggest reasons he picked Michigan was because it had an elite blend of strong academics and great football. But I think Stanford's academics played a role down the stretch, and they really did. You wouldn't think about it from, a Stanford perspective, but they really invested a lot of NIL in Zion Robinson. And I think the NIL got to a point where Michigan said, you know what, we're going to pivot, right? And so they did. The following day, Zion ended up flipping to Stanford, and Michigan got a flip from Georgia commit Brady Marchese, who was actually on the same official visit as Zion Robinson in the summer. And Marchese was actually a little bit higher on the board, and Michigan was on the verge of landing him in the summer until NIL became a bit too much. And, he ended up picking Georgia. And there was a lot going on with those negotiations. Now you fast forward to the day after signing day, you're in this position where Zion's about to flip. And the NIL price is going up. Michigan's saying, hey, let's go ahead and pivot. So they did. They went with the guy that was higher on their board. They renegotiated whatever they had talked about in the summer. They got it done quickly. So kudos to Michigan wide receivers coach Ron Bellamy, GM Sean McGee for getting those, for one, Bellamy keeping in contact with Marchese throughout the entire process. And then Sean McGee, the general manager, for helping with those pivotal business discussions down the stretch. So they were able to flip the guy they wanted all along from that visit weekend. I believe it was the first weekend in late May. So in Brady Marchese, they're getting a little bit of a different receiver than Zion, but one with verified times. Marchese is the first wide receiver that Michigan has landed with a verified sub-11 100-meter time since the 2022 recruiting cycle. They needed speed. They got it with him. Now, Travis Johnson has always been the prize of the wide receiver class. He's ranked just outside of the top 100, just absolute fantastic playmaker, big body, super athletic. He was solid throughout the entire process, didn't visit anywhere else in the fall. And then Virginia Tech came in late, and there were more business discussions there, and Virginia Tech was trying to steal everybody during the early period. I think they were doing a lot of business discussions over those 48, 96 hours that it was during the early signing period. And I think they had good communication with Johnson. He was familiar with their new head coach, James Franklin, who had recruited him at Penn State. In fact, Penn State was a finalist when Johnson did pick Michigan in the summer. So they made a late run. It got so close that I said, hey, guys, in our group chat over at the Wolverine, I have to go over to Oscar Smith for this announcement because it's getting tight. At the end of the day, he's stuck with Michigan. So I think that Michigan did enough considering how crazy it was during those 2 days of the first early signing period. Marchese's just outside the top 100 as well. So you have 2 borderline top 100 wide receivers in this class. Now, where you're going to get your answer, Josh, is will Michigan spend in the portal at wide receiver? I think they will. They have to land a guy to come in and make an immediate impact and really help Bryce Underwood. Now, I think Marquise and Johnson can play as freshmen. I think Johnson's a day one instant impact guy, and I think Marquise has a chance to do that as well. But they have to win in the portal, especially, Michigan got thrown around for Calvin Russell there at the end as well.
Right.
Will Michigan make a big NIL run for Calvin Russell, the top 100 wide receiver? He didn't sign with Syracuse. He delayed again. I think it was late at night on the second day of the early period where he finally signed with Syracuse. But I reported over at the Wolverine, that first night that Michigan was thrown around and said, hey, guys, I don't think that the Wolverines are going to make an NIL run here like they tried to do in the summer when he initially committed to Syracuse. They're going to probably save it for the portal. So I think Michigan did enough with the caveat that they're going to spend in the portal and get more help for Bryce Underwood.
All right. Now, there was a big loss. Julian Walker, he's going to end up being a 5-star. I think he was ranked number 26th overall, 4-star right now. But by the time this cycle's over, that would be a 5-star recruit. Were the signs there? Did Michigan miss some of the signs? Because he took a lot of it. And I know there's family connections, and some of this was like, oh, well, Josh, his, father or uncle is on the strength staff there, so he's just going to make some trips. But in the end, South Carolina was able to flip him. Did Michigan miss the signs?
I don't know if they missed the signs as much as they just really wanted to keep him in the class. They were going to do everything they could to make sure he was bought in and locked in, and it was always going to be a tough battle. Michigan knew that when they picked up his commitment this summer. He's a Dutch Fork kid. That's one of the premier programs in South Carolina. Even though his family's from the Midwest, he's a South Carolina kid. His father being on the strength staff at South Carolina obviously was a plus for the Gamecocks, just from a familiarity perspective too, not just, oh, my dad's there. He's been to South Carolina a million times. You said it. He visited for several games in the fall. Yeah. But then I also think his mother wasn't fully bought in. Remember the weekend of the game against Ohio State? That was her first trip on campus. She actually didn't go on the OV where Walker initially committed. So I think that Michigan knew all this, but they saw the talent. They saw that he committed, and they felt like he was a fit for the program. And they said, you know what, we're going to go all in on keeping him. In fact, towards the end of this recruitment, I spoke to as good of a source as you're going to get on the program side about the situation. And they were actually monitoring an in-state prospect, Charlie Gillick, who was a late riser. He actually ended up signing with Texas. And I thought Michigan was going to offer him just in case to have that, backup plan in case Walker did end up flipping to South Carolina. They opted not to because they said, you know what, we're going to hold our guns. We're going to do whatever we can to get this guy on board. So I think Michigan did everything possible. They did everything right. They built a true bond with him and his family. They got his mom on campus. They put together strong NIL discussions. At the end of the day, though, again, it was always going to be tough to pass up South Carolina if you're Julian Walker, given that your dad's there, given that your mom probably prefers it as well. So, the one big red flag to me was our Ethan McDowell, who covered this recruitment a little more than I did. He mentioned that his mother wanted to temporarily move with him to Ann Arbor and then move back to South Carolina. And to me, that's like a 30-day free trial, right? You're not very confident in your decision. You want your mom to be bought in as well. So I think there was just a lot going on there. And that's why I never went above 50-50 for Julian Walker when Michigan fans would ask me. It's definitely a big loss, no matter how much you want to slice it up here. That's a tough loss to lose, basically a 5-star edge. But I think the blow is softened a bit by having another 5-star in Carter Meadows. Michigan traditionally runs the edge position well. So if you're going to have a loss, I don't think you want it at the edge possession because pass rushers are a premium, but you did land arguably the top edge in the cycle in Carter Meadows. So I think that helps. I think Michigan saw the signs. I just think they said, you know what, it's not worth it to take a chance on a project. Let's just fight to keep this guy until the end. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for him.
Okay. Yeah. And, this is a great class for Michigan. Michigan fans, I'm not nitpicking here. I'm just we got EJ Holland on the show. So I just wanted to get some behind the scenes info on what went down on signing day. So one more question. What happened with number 1 running back Savion Hyder? I know he's in the boat now. He signed. It's all done. But he did delay it a day. Was there any concern? How did Michigan fans handle it? And what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, the whole day I was asked, should we be concerned about Savion Hyder? And initially I wasn't, right? I wasn't concerned. I was like, it's Savion being Savion. Like, Savion's a low-key guy. He doesn't like the recruiting process. Yeah. He doesn't like the media. Okay. He doesn't, that's fine. Yeah. That's Savion being Savion. That's what I just told myself the whole time. It wasn't until, I want to say, after Travis Johnson's ceremony, where I ended up actually dropping my phone and some guy reversed on it, and my phone broke, so I didn't have a phone for 2 hours while I was at the Travis Johnson ceremony. And I was driving to the phone repair shop with no GPS, like it's 1997, and Pikachu
amazing.
Just came out. I was like, do I print out MapQuest directions here? But anyway, my phone screen was black, and I felt it vibrating, so I clicked it. I was like, man, let me see who's calling me. So I answer, and I'm like, what's up, man? and the dude on the other end's like, EJ. And I'm like, I don't know who this is. My phone's broken. Steve Wilfong. And I'm like, all right, no. And he's like, should I start digging on Savion Hyder? It's like 7 p.m. And I'm like, sure, man, go ahead. I'm trying to get my phone fixed. As soon as I get an answer, I'll let you know. So both Steve and I ended up digging on it. Obviously, we got the answer that everything was okay. Later that night, I even got confirmation. We got triple confirmation because Savion's dad texted me as well and said, we're signing. And they stayed true to that. They signed at 7:30.
So was it another team? What was the reason for the pause?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, man. I think a lot of people thought it was another team coming in, like Tennessee or maybe like James Franklin. And there was some interest from those teams. Virginia Tech did try to talk late. I was told that Savion shut it down, man. He didn't even want to talk to other teams. Weeks ago, he just told his advisor, Adam McCann, I don't want to deal with this. So it didn't have anything to do with that. It actually had to just do with the way the NIL stuff was structured. And I think there were a few prospects that had a similar issue. Mark Bowman, the 5-star tight end out at USC, where they had to get the language correct and make sure it got through compliance and things of that nature, especially, with the new governing body with NIL as you enroll. Savion's an early enrollee. I'm assuming Bowman is as well. So I think that, both of those guys and maybe a few others throughout the country probably had a bit of a delay just as they were trying to make sure, all the T's crossed, all the I's were dotted. So it had nothing to do with Savion not wanting to be, or entertaining other offers or anything. It was just Savion being Savion and the NCAA being the NCAA.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty much what Steve said. I gave him hell. I didn't really believe him, but now that the way you put it, it does make a little bit more sense, seeing that Mark Bowman had the same issue, because we were kind of looking at him and wondering the same reason. Like, hey, Mark Bowman is pretty much the highest paid tight end out of high school in history. What could he possibly have an issue with? But, hey, some of these deals are new. Some of these rules are new. So compliances have a little harder time going through them. So maybe that was just the issue. But Savion Hyder, he's inked. It's done. We'll see what Michigan does in the portal. Kerry Coombs is coming on board. It's going to be an exciting offseason. EJ Holland with the Wolverine. Thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop.
Hey, Josh, I just want to tell you one thing, Josh.
What?
I would never opt out of coming onto the show. You have teams opting out. Even though Michigan didn't make the playoff, I would never opt out of coming onto this show. That's a
You would
really weak mentality, don't you think?
you would tough it out and just do it.
That's exactly what I just did, man.
All right, that's why you're the best.
The inside
EJ
scoop.
Holland with the
Like and
Wolverine.
subscribe.
Thank you for not opting out on the inside scoop. Let's talk some Texas Tech recruiting because the Red Raiders are in midst of their best season ever, currently sitting at 12-1, Big 12 champs in blowout fashion. We watched that on Saturday night, and now sitting at number 4 in the playoff seedings with a week 1 bye. Texas Tech is sitting right where they want to be. We're going to break it down in this video with Sam Spiegelman, but first, Texas Tech fans, do me a favor. Hit subscribe. We are talking Red Raider recruiting, transfer portal. We're talking Red Raiders all offseason long, so jump on board and hit subscribe. All right, let's bring in Sam Spiegelman. Sam, who's responsible? I want to know who in Lubbock is responsible for building this monster.
Yeah, you have to credit the general manager, James Blanchard. We spoke to him in the middle of the season, in the middle of this chase for the Big 12 championship, their first ever. And he said it was a dream to be able to get to recruit the best players in the country and go head to head with Texas and Ohio State and Alabama for the best of the best. And over the years, we've seen Texas Tech find those diamonds in the rough and transform them into NFL draft picks.
Yeah.
We've seen them recruit really well. They called it relationships at a certain point in the process. And now we're seeing with some NIL backing that a general manager who can scout talent and build relationships and go into different parts of the country, different parts of Texas, parts unknown, and find talent, they can win some championships. And this team is a blend of all of that, from Jacob Rodriguez, who is one of those great evals by James Blanchard, to David Bailey, who wasn't having success at Stanford. They went out, spent money in the portal to bring him in, and he's been absolutely prolific, rushing the quarterback off the edge. We're seeing just a fantastic combination of good coaching, great evaluations, and returns on investment in Lubbock, and that is what the secret to the sauce is in West Texas right now.
Yeah, and I feel like they kind of got this traction with crushing the portal. Probably doing more in the portal than they did at the high school level. But insiders in the recruiting industry understand what they are building, and fans might look at the number 22 finish of the signing day class and be like, well, 22, I mean, that's not exactly what you think of when you think of a 12-1 season, finishing number 22. But they got some real difference makers in this class. Who do you think is coming in and making an early impact that Texas Tech signed in 2026?
Yeah, let's talk about the guys that they spent money on this number 22 class in the country, which, by the way, Texas Tech is not used to recruiting top 25 or top 30 recruiting classes. So it is a big deal in West Texas to be signing a top 25 class. And this class in particular is full of really impact players. You could start on the edge with LaDamian Guyton. South Georgia beat out Georgia and South Carolina for this dynamic defensive lineman that can play multiple positions and add to that pass rush that has been so ferocious this entire season. They won a huge recruiting battle for Felix Ojo, who is a little bit of a projectable offensive tackle, but in Lubbock, where they just got brand new weight room and facilities, that dude's going to look like a different guy after he enrolls in a few weeks and puts 20 or 30 pounds and is probably starting at either left or right tackle for them in a couple of years. And then guys like Donovan Webb, guys that he was coveted by Ohio State, LSU, Michigan, some of the top schools looking for dynamic safeties in the country. Donovan Webb chooses Texas Tech and is one of those, in-state guys that just was infatuated with the direction of this program.
Yeah, I mean, it's all coming together. And then when you think, we always understand recruiting kind of lags a year. So if you're finishing 12-1 this regular season, what's going to happen in 2027? Are they able to capitalize on the success on field when it comes to the recruiting trail in 2027?
They already are. They have the number one class in the country. They have a commitment from the number one player in the country who, I don't know if you want to say it's a coincidence, but is from the same high school that Joey McGuire won high school state championships at. They have a quarterback from commitment from rivals, number one quarterback, Kavian Bryant, and they're heading in the direction with even more talent. They're the favorites for elite wide receiver Julian Caldwell. I have predictions in for top 10 offensive lineman Peyton Miller to wind up playing in Lubbock. They're in a great spot with George Toya, one of the best defensive linemen in the country. Could potentially pair him with K. Adrian Redmond and Jalen Brewster, who are already committed. And they're the favorite to land a top 10 cornerback, Jerry Outhouse from Dallas, who is also coveted by schools like Oklahoma and Georgia, but is famously leaning toward the Red Raiders right now.
All right, so there it is. I mean, finished number 22, but currently with the number 1 class in 2027. And we're not even that early when it comes to 2027 recruiting. I mean, 2027 is here. It's been here. So Texas Tech has a real shot at finishing number 1. All right, Sam, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop today. We are talking Nebraska. The last time we did this, it was about 10 days or so ago. We had Greg Smith here, national analyst at Rivals, on to talk about Dayton Raiola's decommitment from the Huskers. And, you know, we kind of broke it down. It was strange coming just a few days ahead of National Signing Day, but more news has made its way to the forefront, and it starts to make the story make a little bit more sense. A couple days ago, Nebraska fired assistant coach Donovan Raiola per Rivals Greg Smith and On3's Pete Nakos. You know, he's been the offensive line coach for the Huskers since 2022, and he's also the uncle of sophomore quarterback Dylan Raiola. So if you guys remember that video, we were kind of trying to do the science of what the Dayton Raiola decommitment meant, and obviously now with more news, I want to talk with Greg Smith. Let's bring him in. So now, you know, we were doing the math on that, and it felt like we were missing a couple variables. Do you think Dayton Raiola already knew that his uncle was being fired when he pulled the trigger to decommit from Nebraska?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. It's tough because on one hand, there could have been some conversations where, you know, they were asking, hey, is he going to be there for sure? And Matt Rule couldn't give him a definitive answer. So maybe, but I don't know if we knew at that point that, you know, Donovan was going to be let go then, right? And so I don't think that they knew at that point. But it is also interesting how this flows. And we, like you said, we've talked about this now since the Dayton Raiola news happened. We were like, man, this is one that is much bigger than your typical late, you know, kind of 2026 quarterback decommitment. Those are always a big deal, but this one even bigger given the circumstances around this and how tied in the family is overall to Nebraska football right now.
Yeah, and the family now consists just of Dylan Raiola, you know, with his uncle gone, his brother off the commit list. Do you think all this points to Dylan being the next Raiola out of Nebraska?
Yeah, it definitely does not help the situation. I will put it that way. And I do think that it's on the table for sure that Dylan goes ahead and enters the transfer portal. We don't have definitive word on that yet. But I definitely think it's something that the family is considering and that will be talked about here at length as we run up really to Nebraska's bowl game. I think that sometime between now and Nebraska's bowl game, we'll have an answer on that because everything moves so quickly. If he is to move on, he's going to want to know his next landing spot and kind of get ahead of what is always now a busy quarterback market. As you know, there's always quarterback needy teams out there. So yeah, I don't think this helps at all that his uncle is no longer with the program. And I do think that there are conversations being had about him potentially leaving Nebraska football.
Yeah, and you know, the buzz around here is that the market, if he were to enter the portal, there would be quite a market for Dylan Raiola. So we'll have to wait and see what he does. Nebraska fans, what do you think he does? Talk to us. TJ Lateef on the roster. Trey Taylor, 2027, locked in. Do you think if Dylan Raiola leaves, they need to hit the portal and find some more arms?
Yeah, I definitely think they're going to have to do that then. And if that's the case and Dylan's not there, they're going to have to find another arm. The problem then becomes, and you see this happen sometimes where you have a guy that's already on the roster, in this case, TJ Lateef, that would then be the next presumed starter. You're now having to go and sell someone in the portal that, hey, I don't know if we can guarantee you a starting spot, but you're going to come in and compete. And we know how that goes with quarterbacks. It can be really tricky to be able to do that. And guys definitely don't want to come and say, hey, I'm going to be the backup. And then on top of that, to say, hey, maybe you'll compete for the job. Maybe you'll be the backup. But we have a guy in Trey Taylor that we're heavily invested in for the 27 group that's coming in right behind you. And he's going to enroll early. He's already a fan favorite. It's going to be a really tricky situation to navigate if you're Matt Rule and you have to go into the portal and get a quarterback this cycle.
Yeah, great point. I mean, most quarterbacks are in the portal because they're not being guaranteed a starting job. So unless you're winning national championships or at least competing year in, year out, it's going to be tough to convince a guy to come and be a backup. So, yeah, you got a good point there. And then if you bring in a true starter, you risk TJ Lateef hitting the portal and looking for a new home. So, yeah, there's a lot to weigh there. We like Trey Taylor, the 2027 quarterback. He seems like he's locked in. What have you seen from him? Why has Nebraska made him such a priority at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I think that he's a kid that kind of has the whole package at the quarterback spot. I think that he would fit in a variety of offensive schemes because he's very cerebral. He's quick out there on the field to process. He's got a good, strong arm. He's got an accurate arm, but he's also a better athlete than I think he's been even able to show as he's been rising up the high school ranks. And so I think he's a dynamite quarterback. And you've seen kind of all of the off the field stuff, the intangibles, kind of the leader of that class in the 27 group, had like really strongly peer recruiting from the beginning. He was, in Lincoln over Thanksgiving, even because his dad told me that he wanted to be here for Thanksgiving. I live in Lincoln, spoiler alert. He wanted to be here in Lincoln for Thanksgiving and then stay through the Iowa game. And then, they got snowed in and he just stayed on campus and hung out. Like they are all in on Nebraska. And you can kind of see why with how well he's done at peer recruiting and trying to help get this class really built in 27.
Yeah, and just to round out this quarterback Nebraska talk, it sounds like they found their guy for 2028. Maybe not their top guy, but there is a name emerging in 2028 that also has ties to the Nebraska program.
Yeah, that's Trayvon Towns. He's a 2028 quarterback out of Rancho Cucamonga in California. He actually has the same trainer as TJ Lateef, who's kind of burst on the scene for Nebraska. So, taking advantage of those connections and ties are always a good thing for programs. And Trayvon was out in Nebraska for that Iowa game. And anytime you've got a kid that was willing to make that trip from California in the cold, which that Iowa game always is, that's always a big deal. He had very good things to say about his time with Nebraska's offensive staff. So he's definitely a name to watch moving forward for the Huskers in the 2028 quarterback cycle because you could never start too early when it comes to talking about quarterbacks.
Man, yeah. And, we're gonna be talking Nebraska quarterback recruiting, I feel like, this entire offseason because Dylan Raiola is really the big domino when that one falls. I mean, it's going to prompt transfer portal movement, maybe another high school quarterback that they look at in 2027. So we'll see. But Nebraska fans, season is over. Regular season's over. How are you guys feeling about the offseason? How are you feeling about TJ Lateef, Trey Taylor, Dylan Raiola? Who do you think is on the roster next season? Talk to us. Comment section below.